One of the things I love about being a storyteller is having the freedom to play with a story. I don't have to tell it like everyone else tells it. I don't have to tell it like it's been written down. I can make the hero the villain. I can change the focus of the story to make it relevant to the time that we're in now, to address issues that there are now. Or sometimes, given that most Irish stories are miserable and sad and have a nasty ending to them, it's nice to be able to just play with them and make it all a little bit lighter. So, hopefully you can enjoy the story I'm about to tell you. It's known as the Legend of Knockgrafton. Enjoy. There was once a man in Ireland simply known as Lusmore. Now, Lusmore was a young man and he was very well thought of by all the people who knew him. But he was called Lusmore because he always wore a sprig of foxglove in his hat. Lusmore being the Irish word for foxglove. The thing was, Lusmore had this massive hump on his back which had him constantly doubled over, which means no one ever saw his face, but they instantly knew him by the flower. And Lusmore was not the type of person to gripe or to grumble or to complain. In fact, Lusmore had a great life. He was an incredibly talented basket weaver. The creations he made with willow were something to behold. And he actually made quite a good living out of it. He used to work away in his baskets all week, and then every Saturday he would head off to the marketplace. Now, going to the market was a 2-hour walk for Lusmore, and like I said, he wasn't the type to complain. And even though he was doubled over and laden up with baskets hanging off every possible part of him, tied to with ropes, as he walked along, he'd simply see the creatures that were on the ground. You know, he might see a hedgehog rustling along with the bottom of the hedgerows, or bugs, and he'd talk to them and he'd say hello. Lusmore actually recognised a lot of people just by their shoes. He'd know who they were, and he'd know how their life was going by the state of their shoes. But Lusmore was always kind and always friendly. And the thing was, Lusmore was always one of the first people to arrive at the market, and most of his baskets would be gone before the market even opened, because all of the other sellers wanted to display their goods in his baskets. They knew that their stuff would sell well. They also knew it didn't hurt to give Lusmore little gifts. If you were a cheese seller, let's say, you'd give Lusmore a little bit of cheese for his lunch, and he'd taste it, and it'd be so delicious he would make sure to tell everyone about it. So it was good business to look after Lusmore as well. Now, even though all of Lusmore's creations were gone by lunchtime, he stayed till the very end. He loved the hustle and the bustle, the noises and the chats that were had. So usually be fairly late when he was leaving. And it was on one of these late evenings when Lusmore was walking home, no longer laden down with baskets, just simply gifts from other sellers in his pockets, and of course his money, his hat on his head with a sprig of foxglove. He'd make the 2-hour journey home. But he was tired this day. He'd had a great day. He'd expelled so much energy and so much positivity that when he was walking home, he got a little bit tired. And he came upon the hill of Knockgrafton. And he decided that he would take a moment's break. He would take a little rest. He just sat himself down at the bottom of the hill and he allowed his eyes to close, just for a moment. Of course, it was much more than a moment, and when Lusmore opened his eyes, he may as well not have opened his eyes, because it was pitch black, and as his eyes adjusted to the light, he could make out the stars in the sky and some silhouettes and soft glows of light. But what woke Lusmore was a noise. It was this soft, rhythmical kind of noise, like a humming or a singing, but he couldn't quite make out the words. Lusmore realised that the noise was coming from the top of the hill behind him, so he rolled himself over and he climbed up the hill. And the further he got up the hill, the music, the song became clearer and clearer. And by the time he got to the top of the hill, just peering up over the edge, Lusmore saw the wee folk, the good folk, just all dancing around on the top of the hill, having a great time and partying, and they were singing, "De loon de mat, de loon de mat, de loon de mat," which is very simply Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday. Not the catchiest song, quite simple, but he was enjoying it. He was watching their merriment and listening to the music, and he found his hand tapping lightly on the mound. And as he was listening to it, caught up in the magic of it, all of a sudden he went, Decaying. Well, the little people heard Lusmore. He'd interrupted their song, and he'd simply just added Wednesday, but they rushed over to him, they grabbed him, and they dragged him on top of the hill, tossing him and turning him, pulling him and pinching him. But they were laughing. So eventually they let him settle. He sees this little man straight in front of him. The little man says, "Lusmore," he says, "we've seen you pass by this hill every week for years and years. You always seem so cheery and bright. You always have a song and a little dance in your step. We're so glad that you join us. And not only have you joined us, you've gifted us an extra part to our song." Now, I've been singing that song for 500 years, and it might seem obvious now, but I never knew what the next bit of the song was. So I am eternally grateful. So please, Lusmore, what can I do for you? What can I give you? And Lusmore, still caught up in the craziness of all this, thinks to himself, and he says, well, he says, I've money in my pocket. He says, I've food in my belly. I've work that I love and have a modest home. There's not really anything that I want, so thank you, but I'm fine. The little man was not okay with this. And if you've ever had any dealings with an Irish person, oh, no, they have to repay a debt. It's not enough, for you to give them something. They have to give you something in return. So the little man was quite insistent, to the point where it made Lusmore quite nervous. Well, Lusmore thought about it and reluctantly says, I have this massive hump on my back, and I'm not one to complain. Please, don't think that I don't love my life, but it does make things harder. I've never been able to see the horizon or look up at the sun in the sky. I want to be able to look people in the face and talk to them and thank them for their kindness. The little man just laughed. He clapped his hands together as he said, we can fix that for you. Again, the wee folk, they just clamoured and climbed all over Lusmore again, pinching and pulling and tossing him and turning him until eventually his balance was lost. And he rolled back down the hill. He hit off every rock and every stick along the way. And when he got to the bottom of the hill, he was so dizzy, his head was spinning. He saw the stars just twisting around in the night sky, and again his eyes closed. When Lusmore opened his eyes again, many hours later, it was bright. The sun was warm on him. He looked around the ground that he was lying on. He saw his hat with the sprig of foxglove. He pulled it onto his head, and he checked his pockets for his money, and he was a bit bashed and a bit bruised, but he stood up and he was like, oh my goodness, he said. Suddenly he was standing tall. He could see everything. He could see the horizon, the treetops, the birds flying in the sky. The sun was in the sky, and he couldn't believe himself. And even though he was sore, he danced a jig. He laughed and he sang. I think that was probably the quickest he'd ever made at home. He ran and did cartwheels. He was so happy with life. When he arrived back into his little town, all the people just saw this stranger coming into the town, and so giddy and acting so foolish. And a couple of the young women commented on how handsome this stranger was. But then they recognised a sprig of foxglove in his hair, and they called to him. Lusmore, is that you? He says, it is, it's me. He says, I've had the most amazing night. Please gather round and let me tell you all about it. And he did. He told them all the story. In fact, and in fairness, every time he went to the market, people gathered around to listen to his story. Every time Lusmore walked to and from the market as well, he made sure to tip his hat to the good folk, to the wee folk. He listened for their soft song. He hoped he'd catch a glimpse of them again, but he never did. He had a new lease on life, though. He was still as happy as he ever was, but now he could look people in the face. Now he could smile, feel the sun on his face, and life was good. So, as I said before that story, it's nice to be able to play with the tales. There's a whole other section to that story about a nasty kind of guy, a bit of a fool, who's also got a hump on his back, a guy by the name of Jack Madden. But it puts an unnecessary nasty twist in the story, and I just wasn't in the mood for it. But I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, like, subscribe, share it. You can always find me over on TikTok and Instagram, you know. But yeah, genuinely, thank you so much for listening to the story. You can also make sure to go and check out my podcast. A lot of the older stories on podcast, I'm going to record in video format now and pop them on YouTube as well. So thank you very much. Have an amazing day.